listeners. So today's interview is going to be pretty interesting. So I'm going to be speaking with recent college graduate Caish. She studied personal financial planning in college, and she's an accredited financial counselor. Currently, she's a client service associate at Gen Y Financial Planning, and Caish is super interesting because she's led a humanitarian experience where she built classrooms in Paraguay and Ecuador. Caish has also been recently featured in CNBC for Concerned and Confused About the Future Young Adults Trying to Navigate Through the Coronavirus Crisis. I hope you guys enjoy this interview, and I'm super excited. Hi, Caish. Thank you so much for coming on Wi-Fi Matters today. I'm super excited to have you here, and I really can't wait to learn more about everything you do. Yeah.
Hi, thanks so much, Chrissy, for having me on the podcast. I'm super excited to be here with you.
Thank you. So first, can you tell us about Gen Y planning and I guess your job description there?
Yeah, so I am the client service associate at Gen Y Planning, and Gen Y Planning is a virtual financial planning firm that helps people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s kind of plan and reach their financial goals. So one thing that we focus on is simplifying, streamlining, and automating your finances. So we'll help people like set up savings, like automatic savings contributions to different savings accounts. And we just help them with their financial situation.
And so you're a recent college graduate. So did you feel that you were ready for like the real world?
Yeah, so it's definitely stressful, right? Going out into the real world. And I think that life always kind of gives us surprises or things that we don't anticipate.
Yeah.
But like from a financial perspective, because I majored in financial planning, I think that degree really helped me be prepared for real world finances. I had a lot of knowledge about kind of like the subject, and I knew that if there was any point that I needed help with my finances, because of what I'd learned, I knew where I could find the right help.
Okay, that makes sense. And so you were a financial coach at your university and the Money Management Resource Center. And so I guess you like volunteered helping students with their financial questions. So what's the most common question that college students have regarding money and finances?
That's a really great question. As a coach, I think the question that I got asked the most was, tell me what is okay to spend my money on. What is the right amount to be, spending on eating out, or how do I budget, or how do I manage my student loans? And those are kind of the questions that I answered most often.
Did you notice a sort of difference in the understanding of finances between student to student?
Yeah, totally. So I think everyone comes from like a different financial background.
Yeah.
So like everyone's experience with money has been like a little different.
Yeah.
And there's actually a really cool exercise that can kind of help you walk through like your history with money and your relationship around it. I call it the money egg activity. That's what most people call it. But if you want, we can kind of walk through that activity. Is that okay?
That'd be great. Yeah.
Okay. So for people that are listening, you're going to want to grab a pen and paper. So basically, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take your piece of paper and draw a giant, large egg on your paper. So it should take up the entire page, but don't worry about, if it's a perfect oval or not, because no one's going to see it except you.
Yeah.
So the second thing that you'll do is basically in chronological order, you're going to draw from the earliest to the most recent, starting at the bottom of your egg and working to the top, just little sketches of your money memory. So you'll start with your earliest memory of money, and then just kind of build up from there. And it doesn't matter whether it was like a positive or a negative emotion, or experience, just put it down. And so once you've sketched that, just draw a line above that and then like do the next memory. So you're going to layer it up until you've got your whole egg filled with all the memories that you can kind of remember, or the ones that are most prominent in your mind. So once you've drawn all your memories, you're going to start back again at the bottom, and you're going to kind of identify whether you're going to look at each memory and identify whether it was a positive memory or a negative memory, and maybe some emotions that you felt when you experienced that. So you can write like a plus or a minus sign, and then the emotion that you felt. Okay. And once you've done that, I want you to kind of consider the following questions. So I'm going to ask you these. And for those at home, you can ask yourself these questions as well.
Mhm.
So for you, Krithi, what were the biggest 3 positive experiences you had on your egg?
So it was the earliest money memory I had. And so the doors, they'd have these like little, it's really weird. They had these like slits in them. And so like I'd always take pennies and coins and I just put them down the slits. So they just like piled up like in the like, I don't know, like inside the frame of the door. It's really hard to explain. It was so fun. So yeah, um that was my happiest memory. And then
Great.
I guess traveling, I love to travel. And so,
Hmm.
I mean, obviously when you travel, you spend money, right? And like to get all these extremely interesting experiences. So I love traveling, like, um, it's just super interesting. And then, okay, I love to eat. So I'm a big foodie. So eating out is probably my next. So I love going to restaurants and exploring different cuisines. So yeah.
Very cool. I love
Mhm.
all 3 of those.
Yeah.
And so I also want you to tell me what were kind of the negative
Mhm.
events or experiences that you identified in your egg.
Um, Coronavirus definitely is a negative event for me, especially like, well, for the whole world, like economies are turned upside down and there's more like stress inside my household, right? And I'm sure it's the same in a lot of people's lives right now. So that's probably the biggest change and it's caused the most like, I guess, negativity for all my financial experiences because it's changed a lot of my day-to-day life as well, right? And then I'd say like, well, we just moved into a new house. And so like I really like I guess it's a financial experience, right? Cuz like moving into a new house, but also like I just really miss my old house. So it was a little like
Yeah.
sad. I don't know. Like it's a big change in our lifestyle, so that's probably one thing. And then I play tennis, and so there's so many amazing positive experiences with tennis. But you know, it is a sport where you definitely put a lot of hard work and money into it as well. And so there's also negative experiences that have happened in tennis. So that's also one of the other things I'd say.
That totally makes sense. Well, thanks so much for sharing and being vulnerable
Yeah.
about those experiences in your life.
Totally.
So, looking at these events, now I want you to kind of tell me, are there any financial lessons or life lessons that you have taken from these memories?
Mm. Well, one thing, I guess it's not a lesson, but one thing I've learned about me is that I like to buy a lot. You know, if I get money,
Hmm.
I immediately want to spend it on something. I'm very like, I seek a lot of like fun through external sources, I guess. You know, like I find it fun to buy clothes or like I said, eat out and stuff. And that's one thing I learned about myself. Like financial lessons, I guess like the importance of like knowing what you already have, especially during the coronavirus. Like I can't imagine what so many people in this world are going through right now. And even I'm also finding it difficult, but like knowing that like what I have and knowing my roots, I guess, is important financially. And also knowing that money is a reality. It's not like it doesn't grow on the trees. Like for tennis, like I can't just take it for granted, like it's like my parents are working hard to help me play and stuff. Like I
Yeah.
can't just waste it or something and knowing that it's a real thing and it can come and go.
Yeah, those are awesome lessons to take from that. I love that you said that you really have noticed that like your parents are working hard for it, so not to take it for granted. That's great.
Yeah.
So now the last thing that I want you to do is looking at your lessons and your egg. Like I want you to write out like an overall statement or finish the statement. My money story is, or the moral of the story is, like don't think very hard about it, but just kind of what do you gather from everything that you've experienced with money so far in your life?
I'd say the moral of the story is I guess money isn't always positive. There's negative aspects to it. And knowing where you come from and being grounded is important for money, I think. And understanding what goes behind the scenes, and I guess knowing money doesn't grow on the trees, like knowing all the work everybody puts in and like the whole world, and knowing that it affects everybody. I guess that would be the moral. I don't know.
No, that's great. That's perfect.
Hmm.
And so that is kind of cool to just like let me experience that with you. And that's kind of what I would experience as I was walking through these appointments with different students that came in, is that, you said for your experience that you found that money is kind of emotional, and that sometimes you've realized that it's kind of scarce and it doesn't just grow on trees, and you have to consider the work that goes into
Hmm.
creating it in your life. And that's great. And there might have been people that came into me and they had that same lesson. And other people, once they've, made their egg, realized that they've just always kind of expected money to always be there, and like they've always had it there.
Yeah.
And so every person is going to have, just based on their life experiences, a different money egg story. Like for mine, when I made my money egg, one of my, I guess, moral of the story, I guess, that I came to for me was that you have to work hard to like avoid guilt and embarrassment and fear. And when I like realized like that's the way that I thought about it, I was like, well, I don't want to realize that about myself. And so also making this money can kind of make you realize some of the subconscious beliefs that you have about money that maybe you don't want to have, and you can start changing those. And so after I made my money egg, I was like, okay, well, how can I think differently about how I feel about money?
Yeah,
So
because
that
you
I feel
kind of like address the problem, and now you can improve it and work upon it. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So I think this exercise is a really great way for people to help
No.
them understand their
That's cool.
relationship.
Yeah, I like doing it. Um, yeah, so can you talk a bit more about like transparency and money? And like at home, talking about it openly, I guess.
Yeah. So one thing that I noticed was when I made my money egg, some of those negative experiences that I associated with money actually came from the lack of talking about money at home with my family. And
Okay.
I find it really interesting that in our society, it's kind of like more normal to talk about politics or
Yeah,
sex or religion above money. And it's like, that's kind of strange.
taboo. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a taboo.
Mhm.
So I think one piece of advice that I have tried to implement in my life is kind of striking up conversations with my parents about money. Like
Yeah.
sometimes they feel really uncomfortable about it. And so I've had to think about, all right, what are some other ways that I could ask them? And so maybe start by asking your parents, what did you learn from your parents about money? And just kind of be curious and willing to talk about it, even though it might feel kind of awkward for you and the other person, and find ways that maybe you feel a little bit more comfortable asking it.
Okay, that's great. That makes sense. Um, so how do high school students like prepare for financial success in college? Because it's an extremely different lifestyle. So how do we prepare, I guess?
Yeah, it is definitely different and it can feel really stressful. So I think the three things that I would say high school students could do to prepare for financial success, first would be to start by budgeting with the money that you have right now. So whether you have a job or an allowance, or if you just have savings, whatever it is, set up a spending plan and pre-decide where you're going to put your money before you spend it.
Okay.
So like one thing you could do is maybe consider like a bill like that your parents would normally pay for, maybe like your portion of the family cell phone bill, and
Mhm.
start paying for it, so
Mhm.
that when you start having to pay for it on your own, it's not totally foreign to you.
Prepare.
Because when you budget, you kind of just want to, like, the key is to get in the habit of saving and spending less than you earn, because that will set you up for really great financial success when you're in college.
Okay, that makes sense.
The second thing I would say is to job shadow careers that interest you. So it's like a perfect time in your life to like explore the things that you love doing. And you don't have like a lot of the pressure of like, I have to provide for everything in my life, so I don't have time to explore it. I just have to do a job that makes money.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think right now, if you do that, you won't have to change your major a bunch of times, and you won't need
Okay.
to end up in a job you don't like, maybe because you've already explored your interests.
Okay.
And the last thing I would maybe advise you to do is, if you feel like you have good self-control with spending money,
Mm-hmm.
one thing you can do is ask your parents to co-sign for a credit card,
Yeah.
because you can't get one until you're
18.
18. Mhm. But that way you can start building your credit. So if you do get a credit card, make sure that you use this card really only for emergencies and pay it off immediately after you spent money on it,
Mm-hmm.
because it was going to help you leaps and bounds as far as knowing how to pay off your credit card and not accumulate credit card debt before you get in college. But
Mm-hmm.
it'll also help you build a good credit score so that in the future, if you want to finance different purchases like a house or a car, you have the credit score to where you'll be approved for those kind of loans.
Wait, so what exactly is credit score? Like, I feel like I don't have a good understanding of it.
That's a really good question. So your credit score is basically just a number that different lenders, they report whether you pay your debts on time or not.
Okay.
And then based on how well you pay those debts back or not, they give you like a score that when you're going to apply to get debt, whether that's a credit card or a car loan or something like that, they're going to look at that history and say, okay, this number means that you're good at borrowing money, or this number means that you're not good at paying it back. And so it really affects a lot of the things that you do. And so it's important to try and build a good credit score. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So I know that you lived in El Salvador and Belize, right, for 18 months.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's super cool. Like, tell me about this experience, and also,
Yeah.
yeah, and what's your take on like, I guess the financial differences between North America and Central America?
Yes. So I, like you, Krithi, love to travel.
Yeah.
And it was so cool to live in these countries for 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved experiencing the different culture and a new place.
Yeah.
And for me, like, I realized that living in the United States, we're definitely like a first world country. We have like a developed economy, we have a lot of freedom to create business and commerce, and we have a more structured government so that there's less corruption than those I've experienced abroad.
Mm.
So because of that, like, we have a lot more financial abundance. And that was definitely different looking at North America versus the countries I lived in Central America. But one thing that I noticed that was kind of similar was actually in the people and the way they interacted with money. So I was actually, when I lived there, I was a missionary for my church. And part of what I did was proselyting. And so that entailed me talking to like 30 or more different people every single day. We were just interacting with different people a lot.
Okay.
And so as I met all these different people, I saw a lot of different lives. And some of the lives, it was sad because they had been ruined by people who were wasting their money feeding like addictions like alcoholism instead of healthily coping with like their emotions or their issues.
Yeah.
And it was sad because you'd see sometimes they'd be homeless or they'd have a lot of family dysfunction.
Okay.
And I've noticed kind of a similar thing in the United States. There are people that definitely have those same similar issues, but also other people that use money to cope with their emotional issues instead of using healthy coping mechanisms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that was kind of sad. But one thing that was really particularly interesting to me is that I saw a lot of poverty because the economies are different.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting to observe there were people that had the exact same amounts of money, but entirely different lives just because of the way that they used money and viewed its value in their life.
Mm-hmm.
So like some people were more like they felt entitled that they should have more. And they kind of had this attitude that because they didn't have more, they had been like shortchanged in their life. And so not only were they unhappy, but they often would waste their money like chasing the next big thing, like I want to buy this or whatever.
That makes
And
sense.
then there were other people that had the same financial amount of money, right? But they chose to be grateful. And so even though they had like so little and they were so poor, they cherished like spending time with their families and they found creative ways to meet their essential needs. And there were even people who would give me stuff when I knew they really didn't have anything to give, just because that was how they felt. Like,
That's amazing.
it was really awesome. And I saw that like they were so much happier and they spent money on what mattered most. And so I guess my takeaway from that was just like, when you feel entitled about stuff, you're going to end up feeling bad. And it's going to force you like to think
And
that
need
you
more.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to feel like you need more, and you're going to feel like you have to rely on others to create your financial reality. But I realized these other people, they realized that they could count on themselves and their families to create the life that they wanted. And so just whatever circumstance that we're in, I took away from it that like, if I choose to be grateful instead of feeling entitled, like I'll be so much happier and I'll be able to live a good life.
Thanks so much for sharing this, like, I guess, perspective and experience you had. That was amazing.
Yeah.
So, I also know that you led youth groups on a humanitarian trip. So tell me more about this, because that also seems extremely cool. And also, how did this add to your, I guess, knowledge about and thoughts on money?
Yeah. So, like I said, love to travel. So, when I had the opportunity to be a group leader for an organization called HEFY, or Humanitarian Experience for Youth, basically, I took a group of 19 teenagers that were 16 to 19 years old, and we built classrooms for schools in Paraguay, and then I did it again in Ecuador.
Wow, that's so cool.
It was really fun. And I kind of realized, like, serving others and doing charitable things, it really helps people's relationship with money. So, like, I loved being able to give back and help create these schools for these people that really needed it.
Mhm.
But it also kind of put my own situation in perspective, and to be like, wow, I am so blessed. I have so many things in my life that I should give back to other people. And it brought a lot of fulfillment as I helped them. But one thing that was kind of cool financially to me is that I watched some of these 16-year-olds that came on these trips, that they wanted to come because they valued travel and they valued helping others. And so they had saved up like $3,000 of their own money to be able to pay for this trip to
Wow,
come and serve these people.
so cool. Yeah.
So I think that is a perfect example of people spending money in a way that aligns with their values.
Okay. So you just said spending money that aligns with your values. Can you expand a little more on that?
Yes, totally. So the most crucial thing I think about money is to make sure that the way you spend it aligns with your values. So one way to kind of evaluate if the way you spend money actually is the way that your values are is
Mhm.
to do like an experiment I adopted from a guy named Carl Richards.
Okay.
So what I'm going to have you do is grab something to write with. You can flip over that same piece of paper you used for your egg. And then you're going to list the 3 most important things in your life.
I
Then
have.
once you're done with that,
Mhm.
you're going to make another list, and you're going to say the 3 things that you spend the most time on. Then the last thing you're going to do is write down the 3 most recent purchases or things you've spent money on.
Okay.
Okay.
Mhm.
Now, do you mind sharing what each of your 3 lists
Yeah.
are?
So for the 3 most important things in my life, I'd say my family, being like my parents, grandparents, and my puppy, and then my friends. Those are and then that's one of them. Then their health and well-being, and my health and well-being, and also I guess academic and sports success.
Awesome.
Oh, and then for the 3 things I spend most time on, it would be school, tennis, and screen time and like media. The 3 most recent purchases I made, um, I went and bought myself some like brand name clothes. I got a notebook for math, and then I bought ice cream and sparkling water.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing all of that. So now looking at your lists, how do each of those lists relate?
Well, I guess like I spent a lot of time on school and tennis, and that would relate to academic and sport success. And then I'd say the things I purchase, they don't really align with my like, well, except the notebook for math, which was a necessity, they don't really align with the most important things. I just
Yeah.
realized like clothes and ice cream and sparkling water, they don't really align with like family and friends and like my puppy or anything. So I don't,
Isn't that interesting?
yeah. That's
So, do you
perfectly
learn
valid.
something about yourself looking at these lists and that difference?
Yeah, my spending does not align with my values, that's for sure. Yeah.
So, where do you think you could readjust spending your time or money to match the things that are most important to you?
Definitely, I need to, I'd say necessities versus wants. Like, I don't really need some of the stuff I just purchased. And I guess I could have used that money to help me with school and tennis and developing relationships with my family. Does that make sense?
Yeah, those are awesome realizations that you've had. And I love this exercise because every time I do it, I find something that's a little bit out of line. And
Mhm.
so then when I've done this, I go back and I make like a goal for myself. Because there's nothing wrong with buying things that you want. Like we don't always have to only buy what we need, right? We can
Yeah.
buy things that we want, but it's important to buy things that we want because they're going to help us get to those things that are most important or the things that we value most, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe the next time you buy ice cream, you could buy
Yes.
ice cream
Well,
with your friends.
that makes sense. I get it now. I never really thought about this, and I guess writing it down makes it easier to connect the dots and stuff. It's a really interesting exercise.
I'm
Um,
glad you
and
liked
I
it.
like the notion of like, or this idea of spending aligning with your values, which mine definitely doesn't. So yeah. Um,
That's okay.
yeah, I'm gonna improve on it. So how do you empower teens and tweens um, about money?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I think it has to start from within, but really just realizing that money is a way that you can make a lot of your dreams like a reality. And
Mhm.
so start exploring the things that are most important to you and the goals that you have for yourself and your future, and then make a plan of how you want to achieve that.
Okay. Yeah.
So I know for me, I remember being in high school and thinking, oh, I just need more money. And if I had more money, then I'd be happy.
Yeah.
But then I would encourage you, if you think that way, because I noticed this in myself, to
Mhm.
ask yourself, why do I want more money? And
Mhm.
if those reasons align with like the goals and priorities that you have, then that's a good reason. But if it's just because, you want to seem cool and be
Yeah.
rich and
I was
famous,
gonna say, yeah.
maybe that's not the best reason, you know?
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah.
I've
Um.
noticed for me that like sometimes I've been faced with like two different choices that both seem really good. And
Mhm.
so I kind of tend to be more of the person that like I spend on things kind of like impulse buys, but I also try to be like really cheap and
Okay.
like find the best deal or whatever. And so I've noticed sometimes I'll buy things just because they're cheap, or I'll spend money on something really that's really expensive because I think it's what I should want or it's what all my friends are wanting. But my mentor, and he's a genius financial planner, his name's Carl Richard.
The guy who did the exercise.
Yes. So
Okay.
that exercise that came from him, he also introduced me to this concept that's called units of fun.
Hmm.
And so the idea is kind of that you rank each of the things that you want on a fun scale of like 1 to 10, with 10 being like the most fun thing, right?
Yeah.
And then you take the amount that it costs for you to do that thing and you divide it by the number that you gave it on the scale. And
Mhm.
the result is kind of how much units of fun each thing will bring you.
That's interesting.
It is super fun to do. And so you don't have to get like super math nerdy and like calculate everything out, right? But just thinking about the concept about it can
Mhm.
make you make sure that you're using your money in a way that's going to bring you the most fun and happiness in the long run. So even though you might think like, wow, all my friends are getting really nice cars, maybe I should save up and buy a really nice car. Like you said,
But
I love to
do I
travel.
yeah, do I want the car?
Yeah. So
Okay.
kind of calculating that out and just thinking it through like, wait a
Yeah.
second,
Mm.
just because this is a good deal or just because all my friends are doing it, is it what's going to bring me the most fun? And
Yeah.
then kind of focusing on that.
There's something, well, as you're talking about this, this came to my mind, FOMO, like fear of missing out. So, like, I know I experience that sometimes. I don't know if it's, um, I don't think I have severe FOMO or anything, but like, I know a lot of teens, it's a very relevant thing. So, how do we, because FOMO can definitely affect our spending, because it won't align with our values, right? So, can you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, that is a really good question. So I found for me that I have also experienced that before.
Yeah.
I've thought like, maybe I have FOMO, or maybe I feel like I'm doing something just because I'm afraid I'm missing out. And
Mhm.
what I've started doing recently is I started asking myself when I'm feeling that way,
Mhm.
what am I missing out on right now because I'm worried about what I'm missing out on?
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's interesting. I know this sounds very like um mindful, but staying in the now and knowing what you're doing right now instead of worrying about something someone else is doing in the future or something. So yeah.
Yeah, that is totally exactly how it is. You have to be kind of mindful and remember that like you as a person, like you're very unique. Like you made that money egg and your money egg isn't going to be like anyone else's. Like your life isn't like anyone else's. And so your wants are going to be unique. And so even though like something that your friends are doing or someone else is buying might seem more glamorous,
Mm-hmm.
it might not actually bring you happiness because it might not be your unit of fun. And so worrying about missing out on that or like having a little bit of FOMO about that actually makes you miss out on more because you're worrying about it instead of just like being present. And so it's definitely hard to do, but just like being a little bit more aware about it and like keeping yourself in check.
Yeah.
I think that's how you can kind of help yourself through that.
Oh, cool. Yeah, definitely. So what are some of your financial mistakes? And also, what are some of your financial achievements?
This is a really great question. So for me, I think that my mistakes are kind of waiting too long to get a credit card. Part of my money egg is that I actually saw my parents maybe not use credit cards in the best ways every single time. And so I had a big fear of getting credit cards myself because I was like worried I was going to get into credit card debt or not be able to control my spending. And so I waited for a really long time to get a credit card.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, I didn't start building a credit score until I was about 23. And I think for me, that would have been too late. So you're already a step ahead of the game if you start now. So that was definitely a mistake that I learned from, that I try to encourage people to build a good credit score prior to that. One other mistake is that I kind of just put my head in the sand, kind of like an ostrich, and I didn't want to learn about taxes because I didn't understand them, right?
Oh. Mm.
And because of that, I ended up getting a tax bill when I was like 19 years old, and I didn't know like what to do or even where to go to file my taxes in the first place because it wasn't really something that I talked about in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so I would just encourage people that before you get to college, like start looking at places like investopedia.com. They have great resources to learn a little bit more about finances, but kind of learn what taxes are, maybe talk to your parents, talk to a financial advisor so that you can kind of be prepared for that.
Definitely. Yeah.
I would say that one of my greatest financial achievements was actually graduating debt-free from college.
Okay.
And that was a really big deal. And part of the reason I was able to do that is because I did work really hard in high school and got good grades to where I was able to get some scholarships. And then I took advantage of the different resources that are available through the government and got some different Pell Grants that helped me pay for school. So I was able to graduate without any student debt, which was a really big deal for me.
Yeah.
I would say another achievement for me would be choosing an exciting but also profitable career. I think that sometimes it's really easy to like find something that we love but not know how to like make it into a career. And so a lot of my friends have studied like different things that once they graduate there's not really a career path for them. And so I would say definitely explore your interests and like find what you're passionate about, but like make sure you think about it creatively in a way that like you can monetize it and make it a career.
Okay, that makes sense. So what have you learned about money throughout the years?
For me, I've learned that I don't need to be afraid of my parents or my friends' financial mistakes. I can really take any situation, good or bad, and we all can, and just learn from those and use them for our benefit. We don't need to be afraid because we saw a financial mistake, meaning that we will do it, but we can just make note that we're not going to do it. And if we've seen something good that someone's done, we can go ahead and implement that into our life if it matches our values. I think another lesson that I've learned is that money isn't the only currency. I think it's easy to get caught up in like that concept, like I need money. That's the thing that matters the most. But our time is also a currency. And so we have to be conscientious of how we spend that, right?
Yeah, totally.
And so I guess the overall thing that I've learned from that is that spending money on experiences and memories versus buying material things brings me a lot more happiness. And I think from the people I've talked to, it brings most people a lot more happiness doing that.
I think there's like this movement that's trying to get more experiences, like focus on experiences, like in the past years. But, there's definitely ingrained in us, like, oh, I need the newest car, I need the newest purse, like all of that. So, yeah. And so I guess if you could go back to your 15-year-old self, what financial advice would you give to her?
I would tell her not to put so much pressure on herself because I really thought like I needed to have my life figured out. I remember when I was a senior thinking, "Oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm going to do with my career. Like I'm going to be a failure. I need to have this figured out and mapped out perfectly right now or else I'm just going to have a bad life." But that's definitely not how it is. Just keep exploring the things that matter to you and excite you and you'll end up being where you want to be.
Mhm.
And I think that life will just keep evolving and changing, and so will your goals and priorities. And that's like why you just keep planning. And that's kind of what we do as financial planners, right? We take those changes and we help people adjust to the different things in their life, and we keep changing the plan, and that's okay.
That's interesting. Thank you so much for all this advice you've given to me and to the audience. And also, I loved all these exercises and this interactive. I've never really done like a podcast or an episode that's been as interactive as this. And it's really interesting to get me like, I guess, thinking about how I use my money and my values. And all these concepts are so cool. So thank you so much for sharing these.
No problem. I'm so glad that you enjoyed them. I think it's hard because there's a lot of times that
Mhm.
we want to when you know a lot about something you want to talk about it, but I've learned the most for my financial self by doing exercises like this. So I'm glad you could do it and enjoy it, and I'm so grateful that you asked me to be on your podcast. It was super fun talking with you, Krithi.
Thank you.
So that's the end of the interview, and Caish gave us some really interesting exercises to do. And if you haven't already done them, go do them right now. Through the egg experiment, I found it interesting to see my memories in relationship with money and the positive and negative experiences and aspects with money and how we can learn from them. Caish also stresses the importance of having your spending align with your values so that we can get the satisfaction and be more savvy with our spending. I know Caish's experiences in Central and South America helped me and helped us understand, and I know this sounds cheesy, that we need to be grateful for the money we have. You can get a hold of Caish in the episode description at the Gen Y Financial Planning website. And also, please go check out our website at www.wifimatters.com and subscribe to our emailing list if you haven't already, so you can keep up to date with all the exciting content that we are creating. Also, there's a new blog post by me on the Wi-Fi Matters website. It's about why Wi-Fi matters. It's very interesting, and there's a Venn diagram that explains all of it. And please let me know what your thoughts are by sending me a message. Thank you so much for listening, and I can't wait to talk to you guys next time.